The category is What the Trans Darling.
Welcome, thank you for joining us. We've got a lot to get through, and those of you in the UK can probably guess what we're going to be talking about. But before that, Michelle, how are you?
Well, I'm a combination of things. The news came down, and it was a lot, and it kind of feels like this is where everything's all been heading, so I've spent the last week reading everything I can, talking to people, and yeah, it sucks.
It does.
That's an understatement. This really sucks. How are you doing?
I'm alright. Same, really. It does really suck, and it kind of makes me a little fearful and exhausted and upset and all those things that I'm sure a lot of us have been experiencing. So I've been... You know that thing where you just gun something escapist so you can forget about nasty stuff that's going on in reality, and you just spend all your time with your nose in a book or playing a game or whatever? I found mine. It is Breath of the Wild. I have been charging across Hyrule, because if I was doing that, I didn't have to think about the stuff that we're about to talk about, because I knew we'd be doing it now.
Yeah, I love Breath of the Wild. That's like one of the best games ever made. If you're looking for something to distract, then Breath of the Wild is one of the best things.
It's pretty great.
I've been doing similar in my off time. I've been playing a game called Blood Bowl 2.
Ooh.
It's basically what happens if you take Warhammer and American football. So you have orcs and vampires punching the shit out of each other, trying to score touchdowns.
That does actually sound pretty cool, yeah.
It is, but it also isn't, because it's a Warhammer game. So there are rules, and it's turn-based, and it's very frustrating.
I see.
Because you can, every time you do a roll or make a move in the game, there is always a possibility of it going wrong and your player dying.
Yes.
There's always that chance. So there is an element of luck, which can be frustrating, but it is absorbing, and it has been the distraction that I have needed. So I would heartily recommend that game if you hate yourself. Just play Breath of the Wild instead. Breath of the Wild is better.
Yes, Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild. There's a sequel coming. I promise I'm not being paid by Nintendo to say this. If I was, I'd be a lot more enthusiastic about it. But the fact I'm being so low-key and British and understated about it is how you know I'm being honest. And yes, and let's get into the why of that, shall we?
Yeah, let's get the ball rolling. It looks likely that the UK government is exploring the idea of gutting UK equality law to make discriminating against trans people when it comes to accessing single-sex spaces totally lawful, and allowing places like public toilets, changing rooms, and other spaces we need to live any kind of life outside our homes to blanket bar trans people from spaces that align with who they actually are. There is a lot to go through in how we got here, where we are, and what we can do about it. I want to put emphasis on the what we can do about it part, because we are going to cover that too.
Yes, we are.
But yeah, let's get into what this all means and get started.
So during the summer of last year, 2022, Conservative MPs Rishi Sunak, Penny Mordaunt, Kemi Badenoch and Liz Truss battled to become Prime Minister after everybody got sick and tired of Boris Johnson's toxic shit. Now, their shit was just as toxic, but the United Kingdom is a glutton for punishment.
Yeah. Their campaigns featured the usual hallmarks of Conservative thought. Your standard racism, weird economics, and general nonsense. But the big theme from their various debates, hustings and media appearances and everything else was how much they talked about trans issues. The whole leadership contest was mired in anti-trans rhetoric. Kemi Badenoch, Britain's first choice for the job of Prime Minister, held an event where her staff sellotaped labels to gender-neutral toilets designating them for males and females. Penny Mordaunt went back on years of being as close to a trans ally as you could get in the Conservative Party.
Yeah.
And Liz Truss argued that trans women are men, and Rishi Sunak pledged to review the Equality Act, hinting that he would seek to remove protections for trans people that it contains. He was not specific about what protections, or even what this review would be, but we will get to that.
Yes. Now, in August of last year, Liz Truss won the contest and became Prime Minister. The trans community braced themselves, but as soon as she came, or more or less, she was gone. She lasted a little over a month. Thanks to her disastrous disastrous mini-budget that resulted in a deepening of the ongoing cost of living crisis. Now, after her hilarious and inevitable resignation, Rishi Sunak took the top job, and again, the trans community braced itself for what was coming.
In his cabinet, Kemi Badenoch was given the role of Minister for International Trade and was also given the role of Minister for Women and Equalities, which is fucking hilarious.
Yes.
This came after countless examples of her transphobia reported by Ben Hunt at Vice News, including leaked clips of her calling transgender women men, her attempts to crush seemingly any initiative aimed at reducing inequality for trans people, and defending transphobes like Kathleen Stock. She has been noted by many as a keen proponent of culture war bullshit, and her appointment as Women and Equalities Minister was met with dismay across the LGBT community.
So by October last year, we had a Minister for Women and Equalities who has shown time and time again that she is anti-trans at best and outright violently transphobic at worst, and we had a Prime Minister who regularly argued that he supported trans people, but in his words, he felt that biology was important, and he was promising to review the Equality Act.
Yeah, I should probably add that this comes after, what is it, like 7 years now?
Yeah.
Of this anti-trans moral panic being stoked by the media.
Yep.
So politicians may believe, as a result of that there's something to gain from being an anti-trans fuckhead. But let's move on to the things written down. The Equality Act of 2010 itself includes protections for people who have what are called protected characteristics. These protected characteristics include race, age, disability, sexuality, and gender reassignment. That last one is about trans people. That's our one.
Yeah.
Under a combination of sex and gender reassignment, trans people are protected from discrimination in a number of areas, including single-sex spaces as the gender they actually are, rather than the gender assigned to them at birth. These protections are not entirely resting on having a gender recognition certificate. So, for example, a service that provides changing rooms for men and women would be acting unlawfully if they barred transgender women from the women's changing room. There are exceptions in the Act that allow for a trans woman, a specific trans woman, to be blocked from those changing rooms if doing so was proportional and towards a legitimate aim. As proven in court a number of times over the past few years, that legitimate aim cannot be purely in itself to block trans people. But as the Equality Act stands now, trans people's right to access single-sex spaces and services is, the vast majority of the time, a protected right.
So this takes us to February of this year, when Kemi Badenoch wrote a letter to Baroness Kishwa Faulkner, the chair of the Equality and Human Rights Commission, asking the following: I would like your considered advice of the benefits or otherwise of an amendment to the 2010 Act on the current definition of sex, along with any connected or consequential enactments bearing in mind the advantages and disadvantages that such a change might entail for affected groups. On the 3rd of April, Faulkner sent her 20-page response where she argued that amending the Equality Act to define sex as purely biological was worth considering. In the letter she says that there currently is a lack of legal clarity over what sex means, and as such it was worth defining sex as purely biological to bring this so-called clarity. And she gave 8 examples of areas where she believed this would happen.
Yeah, let's get into those 8 areas. They're not great, but yeah, the first one she wrote down was pregnancy and maternity, where she states, as things stand, protections in the Equality Act for pregnant women and new mothers fail to cover trans men who are pregnant and whose legal sex is male. Defining sex as biological sex would resolve this issue. I mean, you know what else would solve the issue?
I mean, lots of things, but I doubt they'd consider quite a few of them.
Yeah, like a lot of different things that wouldn't also be meaning, you know...
You're completely erasing trans men in law.
Yeah, that... I mean, that... This is going to be something we may be repeating a few times on this episode of the podcast, but there seems to be another way that seems fairly obvious, just an amendment saying, and also trans men.
Yes.
Like, just that, and also trans men. Why would that be an option?
Yes.
So yeah, this starts another pattern in this where they sort of argue that, you know, doing this thing would maybe benefit trans men in some way by calling them women. And
Yeah.
I don't know about you, Ashley, but the trans men I've talked to, they don't like that.
Yeah. Oddly enough, 1 or 2 of the trans guys that I know, just 1 or 2, have remarked that they don't care for that either. I'm kidding, obviously, all of them.
Absolutely astonishing. Like, how could the EHRC know? I mean, you know, obviously like, you can't expect them to have met any trans people ever, clearly.
Well, certainly not that she's aware of. And maybe she did. Maybe this whole thing is rooted in, I met a trans person and they were rude to me. But I doubt it's even that, to be honest.
Yeah.
They're starting with transphobia and working backwards to, okay, what would we need to put into the law to ensure maximum denial of these people's existence? And then you end up with an 8-point list of how that can be done.
Yeah, let's go on to the next one. Freedom of association for lesbians and gay men. If sex means legal sex, then sexual orientation changes on acquiring a gender recognition certificate. Some trans women with a gender recognition certificate become legally lesbian. I'm going to read the rest of this, but I've got thoughts.
Oh, yeah,
I
me
have
too.
some thoughts. And some trans men with a gender recognition certificate become gay men.
Yes.
As things stand, a lesbian support group, for instance, in brackets, may have to admit a trans woman with a GRC attracted to women without a GRC, or to trans women who have obtained a GRC. On the biological definition, it could restrict membership to biological women. Now,
Yes.
what is legally lesbian?
I was wondering that myself, because it's not like there's a form that we have to, when we come out, we have to fill in the, 69F form and send that back so we are then legally recognised as gay. That's not a thing that happens. We don't have legally gay or legally a lesbian. So I'm thinking, that could be a good t-shirt slogan, illegally gay. Because, you're a trans man in a relationship with another trans man and neither of you have a GRC, which means that it's illegal, presumably.
Yeah, and also, this will have been a thing in the past, but in the last couple of years, when's the last time you encountered an LGBT space that didn't want trans people in it? Now, I know that I'm in London, and so therefore there's whole areas of London where there's a lot of, like, queer venues and queer spaces and stuff. And I've been to pretty much all of them at this point, and I've never actually met people who are like, oh yeah, we need this to not be where trans people are.
Checking birth certificates on the door.
Yeah, this has only happened. There's only one group in the UK who would even want this, and most of them aren't even fucking gay.
Yeah. And just for clarity, that's the LGB Alliance.
Yeah, a hate group
Yeah.
started by some bellends in a room that got celebrated in the Times when they first established themselves as splitting off from Stonewall, even though none of them were a part of Stonewall. Like, what the fuck did that mean? Like,
And then they were granted charity status.
yeah, that happened.
Yes.
This doesn't
Remember that?
This is the first point that explicitly says, hey, maybe barring trans people from spaces they might need is a good thing. And the third one sort of goes on that line too. Freedom of association for women and men. As things stand, a woman's book club, for instance, may have to admit a trans woman who had obtained a GRC. On the biological definition, it could restrict membership to biological women. Now, I don't know about you, Ashley, but I've never been to a book club that requires genitals.
Yeah, I'm sure there are certain types of book club where, use of genitals is encouraged, but, that's not really the sort of book club that people write about in the Times, I feel. So, yeah, it's just the examples they choose are just very kind of telling. And it's also, I note the repeated use of the term biological women, because of course, as trans people, we are synthetic.
That's a really good point.
We're all biological. That's how, biology works. It's not like we were hewn and crafted in a factory and everybody else was born. We were all born.
Yeah. So the example here is just an example, but the idea here is that so far, out of 3 points out of 8, 2 of them have been, cis people will be able to do things without any trans people there.
Yeah.
And that's not how equality is supposed to work.
Yeah.
Right? Isn't that the exact opposite?
That is, in fact, the exact opposite of what equality is. Because if you're taking any group of society and saying these people need to be segregated and split off and hidden away and made illegal somehow, that's not equality, is it? It's like...
That's oppression is what that is.
Yeah, well, it's doublethink as well. They're kind of calling themselves the Equality and Human Rights Commission in the same way that the Japanese refer to their empire as the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere. You know, they're trying to make it sound like it's something really good and progressive, and it's not. It's now it has become something oppressive.
Yeah, this is deeply concerning. And on that theme,
Yes.
the next one, positive action. Currently, trans women with a GRC could benefit from women's only shortlists and other measures aimed at increasing female participation. Trans men with a GRC could not. A biological definition of sex would correct this perceived anomaly.
It's not an anomaly!
No, it is not.
That's, you know...
But they're arguing that, they're arguing that trans men would want to be on women's only shortlists.
Yes.
Which is not, that's not what they want.
Yeah.
And in trans women, this is like a charter written by the fucking LGBT Alliance or Sex Matters or any number of these fucking hate groups. And
it largely is.
Yeah, it just is.
That's exactly who it's been written by.
Oh my god.
I know. So next is occupational requirements. Employers are sometimes permitted to restrict position to women or to men. An employer can, for example, require that a warden in a women or girls hostel be female. At present, such a role would be open to a trans woman with a GRC, but not to a trans man with a GRC, and again, a biological definition of sex would correct this perceived anomaly. And that's... You know, how many times can we say it? That's not an anomaly. That's a trans woman with a GRC is legally a woman. And so, yes, she would be able to be part of these all-women's shortlists for roles or committees or jobs and whatever. It's, you know, this is us being able to do what we want. They're using the fact that equalities legislation is working as it was intended and saying that's an anomaly.
This is just a charter on ways on... we could stop trans people from doing this and this and this. And we could let trans people who don't want this to have this, this and this. And it's so fucked. What the oh my god.
Yeah, they're just coming at it completely wrong-headed, you know? The next one, and we knew this one was going to come up, didn't we, I think? Single-sex and separate-sex services. Service providers are sometimes permitted to offer services to the sexes separately or to one sex only. Again, they're just constantly using the word sex when the word gender would be more appropriate because they hate the word gender and oh my god, never mind, I'll just carry on reading. For instance, a hospital might run several women-only wards. At present, the starting point is that a trans woman with a GRC can access a women-only service. The service provider would have to conduct a careful balancing exercise to justify excluding all trans women. A biological definition of sex would make it simpler to make a women's only ward a space for biological women. So that's them saying the quiet part out loud. You know, the service provider would have to conduct a careful balancing exercise to justify excluding all trans women, but if we made it biological, it would make that easier. That's what they're saying with that section.
Yeah!
You know, and we've been, you and I in particular, and I think the trans community as a whole, and the many, many people who belong to it and talk on social media and all of the other ways in which we get our work out there, you know, we have been sounding the alarm on exactly this for a long time and been told to calm down, or it's not a priority, or it's not going to get that far. And here it is. You know, this is not law yet, but this is the proposal. They're just making it absolutely obvious what they intend to do. They intend to bar all trans women from accessing a women's only space.
Well, I think technically what they're suggesting is that they allow the barring to happen rather than, you know, not allow it to happen, which is how things are supposed to work now. That's a distinction that they are going to fucking cling on to. But we'll get on to why that's bollocks later on.
Yes, indeed we will. Last two, one of which is sport. At present, to exclude trans women with a GRC from women's sports, the organiser must show that it was necessary to do so in the interests of fairness or safety. A biological definition of sex would mean that organisers could exclude trans women from women's sport without this additional burden. Again...
So they could just do it based on transphobia alone now.
That's exactly it. That's... yeah. You know, more saying the quiet part out loud. I don't think it's the quiet part anymore.
It hasn't been the quiet part for a number of years.
Well...
It's been the front page fucking... and the Times and the Telegraph and from the mouths of ministers for years. It's not quiet.
True, but I haven't seen the manifesto laid out quite like this, and obviously it originating from an organisation that calls itself the Equalities and Human Rights Commission, and they are actively working to suppress both of those things for trans people.
Yeah, that's what... There's no argument here at this point. I don't think there's been an argument against that for a number of years now, but this is very, very clear. Like, the EHRC 5 years ago was saying the exact opposite to this. And then...
Oh, we won't be doing this.
Baroness Faulkner comes along with a bunch of people added to the Board of Commissioners, and suddenly they're singing the tune that this government probably quite liked the sound of.
Yeah, it's like a German march from the late 30s or early 40s, unfortunately. I mean, there's going to be some people say, oh, it's not that bad yet. And it's like, well, that's the problem. You're using the word yet. You're acknowledging it could get there at least. Anyway, finally, data collection. When data are broken down by legal and not biological sex, the result may seriously distort or impoverish our understanding of social and medical phenomena. A biological definition of sex would require public bodies like universities to apply this category without the complexity added by a legal definition of sex to the analysis of data collected in fulfilling the public sector equality duty. So again, saying that biological definition of sex is going to make things easier for people that want to exclude trans people or not have to bother thinking about trans people's existence when collecting data.
Well, yeah, it would cut trans people out of data collecting.
And then you can make the claim in a few years, oh, well, there's no data on it. There's no data on trans people.
Yeah, like, you can't... It's very, very hard to action positive changes for trans people without being able to point at data saying, oh, this is where trans people are getting screwed and this is where trans people are doing all right. Like, this is like a top to bottom scuttling of being trans in public life.
Yeah.
This is what this is. It's like all 8 of those points you could basically sum it up as, we want to make it easier to cut trans people out because that would bring clarity. Like, that's the argument. It would bring clarity.
Yep.
Well, you know what else would bring some fucking clarity? 20 other things that don't do that. If clarity was the goal, if that was actually the goal, there'd be so many things that they could do. Like, they could absolutely add in amendments basically saying, oh, you know, let's protect trans people. Let's make it so data collection has to take gender identity into account. Let's make it so that places know that they can't discriminate against trans people, you know?
Yeah.
That, you know, maybe saying no to you can't come in is bad, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe that would bring some fucking clarity. But no, they've gone the other way, and they're arguing that there isn't because of transphobia, which it absolutely is, it's so painfully obvious that's what it is. It's about the idea that the presence of trans people in these places is bad and wrong. We need to make it easier to stop the bad thing from happening. The bad thing being our mere fucking presence.
Yeah.
It's, how can anyone argue otherwise?
Yeah.
With a straight fucking face. Well, they do, as we will get to later.
Yes, they do.
But what is really revealing as well is the 3 areas which, according to Faulkner, are more ambiguous or potentially disadvantageous in 3 areas. So the first one of these supposed downsides, according to Faulkner, is equal pay provisions. At present, a trans woman with a GRC can bring an equal pay claim by citing a legally male comparator who was paid more. A trans man with a GRC could not. The proposed biological definition would reverse this situation. The effect would be to transfer this right from some trans women to some trans men.
The problem there isn't specifically about equal pay provisions. The problem there is patriarchy. You know, a trans man is somebody transitioning to, you know, manhood, which is often celebrated, isn't it? We might say that some men occasionally have an easier time of it here and there, although don't say that on the internet or you'll get hundreds of them sea lioning you.
Yeah, you know what would bring some clarity to this issue? Maybe just adding something in saying, hey, if you're trans, you could probably bring in a claim because trans men may well be getting fucked over, you know?
Yeah.
Trans women may well also be getting fucked over. Like, maybe that's a thing. Maybe the trans pay gap maybe should be a thing. Or I don't know. It's just, she's bringing this up as a problem. And it kind of is, but also, it wouldn't be a problem if you weren't trying to do this ridiculously heavy-handed gutting of trans rights.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a problem you have created for yourselves.
Yes.
So moving on then, the second point, direct sex discrimination. At present, a trans woman with a GRC can bring a claim of direct sex discrimination as a woman. A trans man with a GRC could not. The proposed biological definition would reverse this situation, and the effect would be to transfer the right from some trans women to some trans men. Again, the problem they're describing is a misogynistic, sexist, male-dominated patriarchal society, right? That's the problem.
Yeah, and if you think about transphobia, what it is, transphobia is a form of sex discrimination. It's literally, you have this sex, therefore you should be this, or you should be treated like this. Like, you boil it down. That's what homophobia is. That's what transphobia is. That's why it's LGBT. That's why it's the queer community. Because if you boil it down, the problem is sexism. And the sexism comes out in very strange ways when you find people like gay men who like to sleep with men, which sexists and homophobes would argue is not how a man should behave. And the same with lesbians. And bisexual people and all the other different sexual minorities, and with trans people, because the argument is, you are really a man, therefore you should be treated like this. That's what it all is. So when you talk about, the problem with our approach that we would like you to do is it may reverse this thing, it just shows how they have a fundamental lack of understanding as to what homophobic, transphobic, and sexism are.
Yeah.
They don't understand what those things are and how they work. And it's just so revolting to see.
Yes.
And the last one, again, is related to that. Indirect sex discrimination. At present, a trans woman with a GRC could bring a claim of indirect discrimination as a woman. A trans man with a GRC could not. The proposed biological definition would reverse this situation. The effect would be to transfer this right from some trans women to some trans men. Now, the last three things we talked about, I should point out, are the problems Faulkner and the EHRC foresee. These are the things they say are bad. And you know what? They kind of are bad.
Yeah.
But also, again, the fact that, like, their solution, the option that they are considering, that they are saying should be considered, would exacerbate these issues, again, just shows the complete misunderstanding as to what sexism, homophobia, and transphobia are.
They're sharing the same root, aren't they? Expectations imposed on a community by other people. And people have always...
on willies and fannies.
Yeah, well, people have always tried to categorize people and tried to claim superiority over other people by doing so. You know, we've seen that play out in a number of contexts, I feel. And it's just, here we are in the first quarter of the 21st century, and we're still talking about these really basic things about, hey, maybe we should just let people be people.
Yeah, like maybe if somebody's born with a fanny, they could do more things than, nursing and teaching. And maybe those born with willies can do more than be in the army. And, I mean, I don't know what they do. Play with Action Man?
Trying to remember what I used to do, and it was mostly just driving around being a problem for everybody I knew. So to summarise all of that, essentially this was the chair of the Equality and Human Rights Commission telling the government that allowing the barring of trans people from single-sex spaces and services would probably be a good thing and bring clarity. Single-sex spaces includes public toilets, changing rooms in shops and gyms, and so many other places. It's hard to argue that if the government actually did this, by adding some amendment to the Equality Act to define sex as purely biological, and therefore enabling places to bar trans people from using services we need to not piss ourselves outside of our homes, that some places will actively bar trans people and severely hinder our ability to engage in society. And of course, not just trans people. There are going to be some cis people who are read as being trans, like a cis woman with short hair, using the women's toilets as she should and is entitled to, and being challenged by a transphobe because her gender presentation doesn't match the picture they've got in their head. It's just...
Yeah, this is going to be a massive barrier for people who are gender non-conforming in general, cis people who are gender non-conforming, for intersex people, but especially trans people at this point, because trans, how do they not see... they must see what this is. Of course they do. They're not naive. They know what they're doing. But it's just how is a trans person supposed to go about their day in the world without knowing if they have a safe pot to piss in? We already struggle with that right now, Just because that the Equality Act says one thing now and there are protections there doesn't mean that they are always accessible to people. There's always stories about trans people trying to seek these spaces and getting turned away or treated like shit anyway.
Yeah.
It's not exactly a fucking paradise today. This will just make it worse. And they genuinely think that, it's I don't really want to give, anti-trans wankers ideas, and there's a chance that some might be listening. If you're listening, fuck you. Just fuck you. Absolutely fuck you, and go to hell and stay there.
Find something else to do with your life, stamp collecting or perhaps a little botany. Find another interest rather than just constantly screaming about trans people on social media and in government parliamentary select committees.
Yeah, anti-trans people, the best thing you could do right now is just sit in a room and shut the fuck up forever. Just leave everyone the fuck alone. But yeah.
Learn to play chess.
They don't...
Breath of the Wild.
Yes! Play Breath of the Wild, or actually play Blood Bowl 2. You deserve that kind of punishment. I mean, I should point out that this letter on its own just has no legal bearing. It's not guidance or anything.
Nope.
It's talking about what the law should be in their opinion, not what it is today. But if the government did decide to change it, like, every fucking anti-trans clown and every anti-trans newspaper would start campaigns against pretty much everything to try and get trans people barred.
Yes.
And some places would, and you wouldn't know which ones are which. This could result in so many things. Like, we're going to get into this deeper later on in the episode, but that's the reality of this, if this was a thing.
Yeah.
And it's horrifying. It is the thing that I have feared the most since this moral panic started. There has been countless episodes of this podcast where I have said, this is the big danger, and this is how they could do it, and this is what could be coming. And oh look, it might be.
It's here.
Yeah,
It is at the door.
Yes.
We don't have time to be polite.
Yeah, so let's go on to the responses from various people. So the Labour Party has been receiving a lot of flack from the UK trans community after repeatedly siding with anti-trans hate groups. We've covered that a lot on previous podcasts. It should be noticed that also Labour don't appear to be making the anti-trans crowd particularly happy either, because there's a perception amongst them that Labour aren't going far enough.
I see.
So Labour are very much trying to both sides of this and pissing off everyone. Like, it's truly a masterclass in how to be ridiculous.
It's pretty impressive, really.
Yeah, it really is. But whilst it was true for a time, many years ago, that the Labour Party was promising to reform the Gender Recognition Act and would regularly argue in favour of trans equality, that cannot be said to be true anymore. So guess what their response was? According to various news reports, the Labour Party put out a statement once the news of the HRC letter broke, saying, "Clarification is a good thing. We will look closely at what's brought forward." They're going along with it, Ashley.
They are going along with it. I wonder
Bullshit
what
line about clarification.
I wonder what the people that we spoke to, the various people that we've spoken to in the Labour Party, wonder what they think about that. And I'm not just talking about Labour for trans rights.
I did speak to one of them the other day, and yeah, they weren't happy about that.
I mean, why would they be? Of course not. And it's just must be so infuriating to be kind of so close to an organisation and to have put work into an organisation that kind of keeps punching you in the face. Or no, it keeps not doing anything while somebody else punches you in the face. And you're getting a very public drubbing, and the Labour Party are trying to say, oh, well, he's making some good points. He's breaking my nose. Well, we should at least listen to him.
Yeah, and this makes out like Nadia Whittome, who was on our podcast recently, Labour MP for Nottingham East. It makes her out to be a fool.
Yeah.
Like, Nadia Whittome is someone I have a lot of time for. She gave time to talk to us on this podcast. She genuinely gives a shit about trans issues in a way that is refreshing amongst an elected official. She is fucking brilliant. But then she comes on our podcast and says a lot of stuff about why we need to defeat the Tories and why Labour will be better. And then Labour come out with stuff like this that make her look like a fool, which she isn't. Like, that's what's happening.
Yeah.
So it's got to the point where no matter how good an ally someone is, and Nadia Whittome is an ally, like, I cannot rate her highly enough.
No question.
We can trust them as people, but can we trust them as people in Labour? I'm not sure if we can, and that's not necessarily their fault when the leadership goes over their heads like this.
Yeah, and just says, well, we'll think about it, maybe.
Yeah, oh my God.
Yeah, so as you can hear, the response from the community has been, as you can probably guess, one of absolute dismay, fear, anger, and all of the points in between. Gray Collier, a trans person and advocacy director at human rights charity Liberty, came out blasting the proposals. Their criticisms come with further weight as they used to be a legal director at the EHRC. They call the proposals nonsense on stilts, and over a number of tweets said the following. following. The suggestion is legally illiterate, unworkable, and is just another way of using trans people's actual lives as a pawn in the culture wars. It's pure transphobia, based on misleading, unevidenced transphobic assumptions, e.g. the notion that a trans man is an appropriate employee where there is an occupational requirement for a woman to do a job, is offensive both to the trans man and to the service users. This proposal, if enacted, would devastate our lives and for no good reason. If you are a trans ally, now is the time to speak up. Both main parties in Westminster think that this is a vote winner. It isn't. Tell them that. This continuous demonisation of trans people has to stop. And it's difficult to disagree, right?
Yeah, no, Gray's right. I mean, Gray would know. And this is a heavily truncated version of his tweet, if you want to see the whole lot. And it's very important you do this time, because I know we keep saying, go check the link in the description for the webpage for this podcast. Do that this time, because there's going to be a lot of information in there that you're going to need to know and need to see, and that will be very helpful to you. You can read the full set of tweets, and they eviscerate the EHRC and the UK government, and they have not, there's not a single syllable that could be argued as wrong. Everything is bang on, and it's terrifying in a way, because sometimes you think, oh, is it really that bad? Have I just read this wrong? And then you hear people like Gray talking about it, and you're just like, no, oh shit. It's really a code red situation.
Yes, it is, and it's difficult to argue that it isn't. And I've seen some people making the attempt, and God's bless them for trying, but also stop it. Stop doing that. This is clearly bad.
Yes.
Unambiguously, red alert, folks.
To other people in the community, Jess Thompson, a non-binary lawyer who works with the Trans Safety Network, wrote an article for Open Democracy arguing that this was part of the right's ideological war on trans people. They pointed out how, in an investigation by the Trans Safety Network, that the EHRC has been ideologically captured by those who are committed to reducing trans rights as much as they can. This all aligns with what has previously been revealed by Ben Hunt and Vice News, Translucent, formerly known as Steph's Place, and with the very public appointments to their board of commissioners like Akua Reindorf, who has worked extensively with the anti-trans hate group the LGBT Alliance, and Alistair Henderson, a lawyer who represented Kira Bell in her quest to end trans healthcare for young people.
Just to point out as well, for a long time, what the organised anti-trans brigade has been putting about is this idea of organisational capture. This idea that, we're not going to get anywhere with, X organisation because of organisational capture. They're too friendly by trans people. The evil transes have captured them. It's all organisational capture. And that's what they're doing. That is absolutely what they are doing. It's in the playbook. It's part of the strategy, is to, as has been said, capture the organisation and then bend it to your will. I should probably stop I'm trying to use that voice less. Apologies.
It's a good voice.
Yeah, I mean, context is important, isn't it?
Yes.
But yeah, just the fact that they are projecting, it's in CinemaScope with Dolby Surround. They are saying the other side are doing the things that they themselves are doing. And that's something that we've seen from the organised anti-trans lot many times, not least with organisational capture.
Yeah, and this is something that member of our team, Alex Bedwell, has been saying for a very long time, and I'm in full agreement with them. I think ages ago, before Alex joined, I made the point that, because how the EHRC works is the Minister for Women and Equalities is the one who puts people on the board of the EHRC. So these are political appointments. And they tend to put people on the board that align with what they want. So the idea that the EHRC is independent, which is what it's supposed to be, is kind of hilarious, because who sets the budget? The government. Who sets the appointments? The government. And Alex has been on this for a long time, basically making the point, and she is right, that maybe it shouldn't be the government in power who are putting members on the board of the supposed independent organisation, because how the fuck are they independent? And so all the people selected were put there by conservative governments, and guess what? The EHRC, after all of that, has come out with this list of anti-trans wankery. Astonishing how that happened.
I wonder if those two things are connected. So to crack on, our view here at What the Trans is pretty much in line with what you've just heard from Collier and O'Thompson. We just cannot get over the cruelty of what is being proposed, and honestly, we're scared. We are scared of what the world will look like if this proposal to gut the Equality Act of protections actually happens. It's not hard to believe that if this did happen, the obsessed anti-trans movement here in the UK would begin petitioning every shop chain, swimming pool, pub, airport, bowling alley, football stadium, library, anywhere to begin essentially blanket banning trans people from using their facilities. Many places maybe wouldn't comply with them, many places would choose to remain trans inclusive, but some won't. Some will change, and they will make a big noise about how they are changing. And it wouldn't always be obvious where was safe and where wasn't. This move would be a disaster for so many trans people's ability to live outside their homes.
This is a scenario that the trans community in general has been talking about, and especially us on this podcast have been talking about for years.
Yeah.
And I have myself been called a number of things, like a doomer and, it'll never happen and all this other stuff. Well, Guess what? I don't like to say, I told you so, because it's a shitty thing to say. It really is. And that people say that, then usually start talking about how I told you so. But fuck's sake, this has been so obvious that something like this was coming.
And so maybe some of these people thought we had more time. Maybe they thought, oh, well, they're not going to start in with the trans stuff. You're not in danger yet. Acknowledging that we could very easily be in danger and not doing anything about that either.
That's a position I kind of held based on the idea that there wasn't going to be enough time. I thought, it's very much on the way, but then suddenly, with all of the chaos of this government changing every 2 seconds, from Boris to Truss to Sunak, that maybe they wouldn't get around to it. But hey, egg on my face. I mean, obviously at this point, the government are in a place of considering.
Yes.
That's where they keep saying they are. They're considering. They haven't publicly made any decisions on this. So there is a reality somewhere in the multiverse that they decide not to do it and move on. I don't think that's likely. I think this is going to be a thing that they try to push through before the next general election or make it a manifesto pledge. I thought that it would be a manifesto pledge mostly. But from talking to people, it sounds like that it's a lot more realistic that they could try something than I may have been aware of in previous podcasts, which sucks. It royally sucks. And the cherry on top of all this, the government on the 25th of January actually pledged to not change the Equality Act.
Yep. They quite specifically said it, didn't they?
They did so on a petition that has well surpassed 120,000 signatures at time of recording, that was arguing for not changing the definition of sex in the Equality Act. This came out on the 25th of January. The government responded to it saying, we're not going to do that. They said, this government believes in individual liberty. There are processes with appropriate checks to allow for those who wish to legally change their gender. Changes to the Equality Act are not necessary. Now, the good thing is that this petition, since all of this started kicking off, has got another 100,000 signatures in a matter of days, pushing it towards getting debated in Parliament, and that is a very good thing. There's a link in the description to it. I'd encourage you to sign it, even though it's past the threshold, because, the more numbers on it, the better our allies will have a chance of arguing against it in the debate. But yeah, the government basically came out and said, we're not going to do this. And then a month later, Kemi Badenoch wrote a letter to the EHRC saying, how do we do this?
They just, you say there's, the chaos of this government, and that's absolutely definitely going to have been a part of it, where they've said one thing and then actually they've all just changed their minds internally within a matter of weeks, and then they start proposing the exact thing they said they wouldn't. And it's not really surprising, but equally, people have been working towards exactly this for years. Can't really stress that enough. The chair of the EHRC, Baroness Faulkner, gave an interview to The Times that was released today at time of recording, which is the 8th of April. Easter Saturday, where she claimed she had struggled to sleep since releasing her letter, citing the negative comments she has been seeing online likening her to Nazis. She also had this to say: service providers will be clearer about the services they wish to offer. I'm hoping that they will continue absolutely to offer trans-inclusive services, but also be clear that they can offer single-sex spaces. They say that malice and incompetence can be hard to differentiate. No truer word has been spoken.
I mean, either she's really naive or she's fucking gaslighting.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with the latter, to be honest. I think she's
been around policy and law and everything her entire working life, and she's just like, I hope that they were made trans inclusive, but I also would like to give the option of letting them bar trans people. And it's just like so fucking naive or so full of shit. Like, I'm not really a bigot. Like, this whole fucking article, I couldn't believe it when she was just being like, oh, it was really hard being caught being like into Nazis and stuff because, you know, my family came from Germany and stuff. And it's like, you're gutting equality law to make it legal to block people because of who they are. I'm sorry, but the comparisons may be heavy-handed, but they're not entirely in the realms of fucking insanity, are they?
Yeah, the problem is I maybe think she doesn't like it because it's a little too accurate. That makes me sick, that, honestly. She puts out this letter publicly saying, hey, yeah, here's a selection of different ways we can oppress trans people, and then says, oh, poor me, this has been so hard for me. Those trans people and their allies are being mean to me. Like, fuck off, Jesus.
Yeah, she's saying, like, I've struggled to sleep, and it's like, that's the appropriate response for what you're doing.
Yeah, so have we.
Yeah. She comes out saying, hey, I want to make it lawful to bar people because of who they are, and then I can't sleep because of the response, poor me. And it's just like, fuck you. Fuck you, Baroness Faulkner. Fuck you, Jesus. What a clown.
It's a selection of clowns, and they're really hateful as well. The problem is that, yes, there's, we can expect a certain level of ridiculous incompetence from them. I can easily envisage a situation where Kemi Badenoch, her downfall comes quite quickly because of something she did not long ago. Not because of her transphobic comments and legislation, but maybe because she took a donation from somebody she shouldn't have taken them from, or because it hurt the image of the Conservative Party. And she gets ousted, and then this all gets dropped, and everybody pretends it didn't happen. That's perhaps the best outcome we could be hoping for, but unfortunately, we might not be that lucky.
And it's probably just as likely to be a thing that even if Kemi Badenoch did vanish, that somebody else would take her place and still maybe try and push this through. Like, that's the thing.
Yeah, it's possible.
Where we are now is the UK government are putting out and briefing the press saying that they are considering it. The next step would be, we're doing this, and then the next step would be the specific steps they would take to make it a thing. So right now we are pre something happening, but this is the siren. This is the red fucking klaxon. This is the whole action stations stage, because maybe they'll turn around and say, no, we're not going to bother. But with something this important, we can't sit on our laurels with this. Like, this letter has no legal standing. Nothing has changed today, and they are considering making the change. The trans community needs to get in there now, and our allies, and make it clear that doing so would make their lives so much harder. So yeah.
So what can we do about all of this? Well, the thing that people immediately say is worth doing, depending on where you live, is to write to your MP. So go find out who your MP is if you don't know. Find the address to their office and their email address. Write a physical letter and an email outlining how these proposals would affect you, their constituent.
Yeah, don't stop. Send more if you don't get a response. Send plenty. Send them often. Send them always. And keep sending them. And even if they are a Conservative, especially if they are a Conservative, because whilst you may not change their mind, whilst your MP might be the most transphobic fuckhead who's ever lived, making it very clear that you and everyone you know will not vote for them, and also making their lives more difficult, will be of positive benefit. So yeah, do that lots. Do it multiple times. And also, go see your MP. Whilst writing to them, insist on meeting them. Show up at their office over and over again. Do not take no for an answer. Badger them. Never leave them alone. Make it clear what this is, how it would affect you, and make it clear that you expect action. And also make it clear that you will not make their life any easier until they do something.
And, you're their constituent. They are there to represent you. If you're able to get in front of them, humanize it. Try and, make it about the way it would affect you and all other trans people, and be public about the fact that you're doing that. Obviously, some people have wildly varying reach on social media, but if you're able to be loud and say on Twitter or Twitch or, wherever you spend your internet time, be loud about it. Tag the office, tag in the party and the MP in question saying, I've written to X person X number of times, haven't received a response. All of the ways that we can try and, I was going to say shame them, but that's obviously slightly important, but slightly difficult difficult. Let me start that again. I was going to say shame them, but you can't shame the shameless. So particularly if they're a Tory, perhaps, give that one some consideration, but be loud about the fact that you're trying to do this, you're trying to get in touch, and they are not representing you by refusing to see you and refusing to even answer. And get all of your friends and family to do the same as you. If so many people are emailing and tagging in social media, sending physical letters about this same issue, they are going to realise that there will be some resistance to what they are trying to do.
Yeah, the whole thing is about making it very obvious that, the reason that politicians do anything, if you boil it right down, is because they believe that there is some kind of upside. Probably for them.
Usually for them, yeah.
If you make it very clear any way you can that may not be the case, that their life may be made more difficult by this happening, they might be pushed towards maybe saying to somebody, this is a bad idea. This is a really bad idea. My mailbag is full. My inbox and my email inbox has crashed. I got trans people showing up my office hours and surgeries queuing down the fucking street. It's a nightmare. My life has become a nightmare because of this. We can't do this. That's the goal. Maybe persuading transphobes to not be transphobic is a fool's errand, but we could definitely make transphobes be like, oh my god, they won't stop.
This is going to be more difficult than we thought. We assumed that with the incredible power of our money and whiteness, we could just breeze it, but apparently not.
Yeah, let's make it difficult. But don't leave it just to your MP. Organise protests. We need protest. Now, the best places, I think, for protesting right now would be outside the Cabinet Office in London. Maybe not Downing Street itself, but definitely the Cabinet Office, because that's where the Government Equalities Office lives. That's where the ministers live. That might be a more effective place to protest, as in, maybe we wouldn't change the minds of ministers, but their staff would hear. Their staff would know. Their staff wouldn't be able to miss anything. And that would be worth something. Basically making it so that the staff know what is going on. And then maybe, hopefully, that would influence. Or at the very least, just being a nuisance outside of the Cabinet Office over and over again might send a message. But also outside the offices of the EHRC, and they have offices in London, Glasgow, Manchester and Cardiff. You can find the addresses for all these on this podcast webpage. The link is in the description of this episode. So if you wanted to, find out where they are, you might find that there. Yep. And, if you're going to do some protests and organise, don't be public in your organising. Be as anonymous as you can. You don't have to tell the police if you're doing a protest that doesn't involve a march. You don't have to tell anyone. You can just show up. So yeah, do that. Avoid talking to the police. It's mostly always dangerous, so don't do that. Even if police show up to your event, you're under no obligation to talk to them. So don't do that. And don't tell them you're doing it. And just do it. And just keep it away from the public as much as possible. You're organising. Only share the details of the event. And for more information on how to organise a protest safely, and to know what your rights are, you can check out Green and Black Cross, an organisation that offers advice on how to protest. And you can find the link for that also on the webpage for this podcast. Again, check the website on this episode. You've got all the information there that you really need to know.
Yeah, and I have to just give a massive shout out to Michelle and the rest of our wonderful team who've been scouring the internet looking for these things so that we're able to signpost people and say, here's how you do this, here's how you can do this, here's where the addresses are, here's, and
Green and Black Cross was definitely from Shroomy on the team. Thanks, Shroomy, for that.
We love you, babes. Mwah. And just finally, and we've already kind of hinted at it, be loud. Be loud about doing it if you're at a protest, or if you are, as I say, trying to contact your MP and they're not responding at all, or you're being constantly given the runaround by them. Be loud about it. Be public. Talk to your local paper. They don't like bad publicity, even if it's in the, Wigan Evening Post or whatever. I'm pretty sure that was the Wigan paper when I was growing up. Whatever. Even if it's just local coverage, they hate bad press. So if there's some bad press, that can steer them to action. So that's what we mean when we say be loud. Think about how to be loud and who to tell about it, and who to quite specifically avoid telling about it.
Yeah. Now you've been around a while, as have I.
Yep, we old.
Do you have any other advice on what people listening can do?
I think we've highlighted a lot of the external things that we can try and do to impede the progress of this, but look after yourselves. And each other as well. Away from all of this, outside the house, all of this stuff is very scary. Inside the house, blankets, cuddling. There's no shame whatsoever in needing some time for yourself. And if you need to be emotional in that time and cry or scream into a pillow, and I've done both of those things several times this week. So, yeah, look after each other as well, because they're coming for the community, and community is how we fight back, I think. We have to do this together. So try and be together with people who understand you and, hey, maybe who love you. And if you don't have that, then find community where you can in your area or online. It's a scary time to be trans, and self-care is important. And if nothing else, stay hydrated.
And play Breath of the Wild if you've got a Switch.
That goes without saying, obviously.
And don't, for goodness sake, play Blood Bowl 2. I cannot emphasise that enough. Saying that, a second that we're done here, you know what I'm going to do?
You're going to go play Blood Bowl 2, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
God, what an episode that was.
I know, there's quite a lot more we could say, but we didn't want this episode to be like 8 hours of us going through absolutely everything. I think we've hit...
It could have so easily been that. Like, when I was putting this together and stuff earlier, I was thinking, should I bring up the previous guidance that the HRC put out? And Alex came in and on the team said the same thing. She was like, should we put that in? Should we put this in? Should we put this in? And I was just like, this podcast could easily be twice the length it already is. And already it's probably too long according to the classical podcasting rules. Like, the rules are supposed to be that you're supposed to, like, keep it under an hour, because that tends to be what people's commute to work is.
Yeah, well, we're only just over that, I suppose. And we've done the whole episode focused on just one thing, and it's rare we do that, but, we really can't stress enough. We are sounding the alarm. We are very, very concerned, and try to respond if you can.
Yeah, it's important to do as much as you are able to do.
But don't push yourself. Don't burn yourself out. This is a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah, currently this is like a good... I think we've got some time on our side, because right now they are considering, although saying that, maybe it could be next week they come out with something. It could be in 6 months from now. It could be a manifesto pledge that is unlikely to happen. We aren't sure, but with something this important, we can't wait around. We got to make it very clear that if there is a chance of this happening, we will make the people in power's life fucking horrible.
Yeah, we need to be as annoying to the MPs as we can, and let everyone else know, everyone we know and love, to do the same. It's about keeping the pressure on them, isn't it?
Yeah, that's got to be the goal from the community at this point. There are people on the inside doing stuff, of course. There actually are people on the inside who are basically just as horrified about this as us. They may not be as public about it, but they are very, very much as distraught as we are. And to those people, I say, fucking get it done. You know who you are. Get it done.
Yeah. Gosh, we could go for hours in terms of saying, oh, and we could do this, and do this, but yes, let's. Yeah,
there will be a number of links in the description that you can read. A very important this time for you to look in the description of wherever you're listening to this and click on the web page link.
It's all there.
It's all there. It's currently all there on a Google Doc that I just need to transfer to the website.
Yes.
But by the time you hear this, it'll be on the website right now. So go right now. Go read that.
Yes, absolutely. And as mentioned, this is a different kind of podcast to what we usually do. If you want a more thorough and full accounting of the latest news, keep an eye on the website. We do a weekly rundown of each of the news. You can get that, as I say, right there on, Monday mornings, I believe.
Yeah, that's by Alex again. Alex has been a big help on this episode. But you also can get Trans Mask Tuesdays, where our resident trans guy, Alex, another Alex, different Alex, with an E, not a Y, he puts together some thoughts about trans mask stuff. I would be surprised if he wasn't writing about this right now.
I kind of think we should have like Trans Mask Monday and Trans Femme Friday, but let's have that discussion at the next team meeting, shall we?
Well, it was going to be Trans Mask Monday, but then I kept being late, so it became Trans Mask Tuesday. I thought the alliteration still worked, but clearly it doesn't.
It's all good. But yes, stay together, look after each other, folks. This is a scary time. Yeah, we love you. Thanks for checking us out. And
yeah, if you liked what you heard and want to keep up to date with this, check out the website. We'll be updating it with all the latest on this, whatthetrans.com. Follow us on Twitter, /whatthetrans, Facebook, /whatthetrans, Instagram, /whatthetrans. We're on Mastodon somewhere. I haven't looked at it in a while. I'll fix that at some point. And we have a Patreon. You want to give us money, do so. If you don't, fine. What the Trans are Patreon. But yeah.
It's what helps us go around and do things like go to protests and have interviews with people. So if you're able to contribute, fantastic, and we love you. We thank you.
If you are organising a protest, let us know, and we'll use some of that Patreon money to get on a train and, tell people about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think I could foresee over the next couple of months that we're going to be spending a lot of time on trains and coaches and all sorts of stuff.
I think you might be right, but that's okay.
Yep, that is the plan.
Yeah.
That is our way of helping, I guess, so let's do it. But yeah, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time for what will hopefully be an update on this that isn't quite as, oh God, it's all going wrong.
Yes, but yes, thank you, and goodbye.
Bye-bye.
This episode of What the Trans was written and produced by Ashley Talbot, Michelle Snow and Alex Bagwell, and was edited by Ben Swithin.
We'd like to thank our Patreon producers, Derek,
Sky Killane,
Eric Widman,
Obfuscated Orange,
Jude,
Monsieur Squirrel,
Fergus Evans,
Anubis a Jackal,
Camino,
Brandon Craig,
Jenny,
Break the System,
Sean Phillips,
Heidi Reardon,
Ezra,
Sophia the Sixth. What happened to the other 5?
Lentil,
Philippa Taprook,
Ramona Martinez,
Alethea Aurora,
Sadie Chagall,
Clara Vulliamy,
Amelia,
Kira the asexual turf buster and her trusty sidekick Jiggly Jubs,
Candy Cox,
Zeph,
Fiona McDonald,
Torikuso H,
Murgatroyd,
Ontologically Unjust,
Stella,
Cindergusser,
Rebecca Prentice,
Crazy Richard,
Dan Oblivion,
Ty Griffiths,
Florence Stanley,
Helen _
Chrissy Jarvis,
a dyslexic velociraptor guardian of the inside milk,
Nick Ross,
Alex Chalkley,
Melody Nix,
Fiona Punchett,
John,
Lynn Mackay,
Nick Duffy,
CB Bailey,
Gordon Cameron,
Peter Kimball,
Wen Witherup,
Vic Parsons,
Tila Wilde,
Rowan Littlejohns,
Desiree Markland,
Patreon user,
Vic Kelly,
Emma Doyle,
Catherine,
Elliot McVeigh,
Cassius Adair,
Melissa Brooks,
Ian Coomber,
Karakan 12,
April Heller,
Sophie Lewis,
Alexandra Lilly,
Claire Scott,
Ariadne Pena,
Lauren O'Nions,
Bernard's Pink Jelly Bean,
Lanus.
and Chris Hubley. Thanks for listening.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you so much. Bye.